I'm Mark Caro, and welcome to episode 35 of Caropop. Our guest this week is co-founder and co-leader of the band Devo, Gerald Casale. We spoke the morning after Devo played a show in New York City, but as you'll hear, he wasn't feeling particularly cheerful about the state of the world or his ongoing collaboration with fellow leader and frontman Mark Mothersbaugh. He wasn't too happy about the band's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame snub either. A lot of us know the story of Devo, how the name is short for the band's theory of de-evolution, and how their perspective was informed by the National Guard student shootings at Kent State University in 1970. Casale was friends with two of the four students killed there. We know that the group's core was two sets of brothers, Mark and Bob Mothersbaugh and Gerald and Bob Casale, who played with powerhouse drummer Alan Myers. And we picture the yellow jumpsuits the band wore while performing its first album, Q, Are We Not Men? A, We Are Devo. We also associate them with the red energy domes atop their heads on Whip It and the rest of the Freedom of Choice album. What doesn't get discussed so much is the music itself. How did Gerald Casale and Mark Mothersbaugh write their songs? Who did what? How did they decide who sang what? How did that collaboration change over the years? When they recorded the songs, did they already have the visual presentations in mind? Who was in charge of that? Would the bandmates wear their jumpsuits and energy domes into the studio? What roles did Bob Mothersbaugh, Gerald's late brother Bob Casale, and the late Alan Myers play in the music's creation? How did Devo transition from a punky guitar-driven band to a synth band? Was that shift a source of tension among the band's leaders? How did Devo get booked on Saturday Night Live so early in its career? And what factor did Neil Young play? What did that experience feel like? What did it mean for the band? And how did they wind up on the show Fridays after that? How was Devo's experience working with producer Brian Eno on Are We Not Men? How did the collaboration with producer Ken Scott on Duty Now for the Future happen? And why is Casale still so unhappy about it? Did the band think Whip It would be a hit? Or were they just as enthused about, say, Girl You Want or Freedom of Choice? What happened to degrade the sound of their fourth album, New Traditionalists? What's the story behind Beautiful World, perhaps the most beloved and barbed Devo song that Casale sings? Casale had to break off the conversation, but we picked it up later that day, and you'll hear part 2 next week. It gets dark. Right now, you can get some satisfaction from part 1 of the Caropop conversation with Gerald Casale. I feel like a lot of discussion of Devo is because you guys were so distinct in your presentation and visuals and sort of concepts that a lot of times people sort of forget how really strong the music itself was. That if you listen to these albums and, you know, you guys were just five guys in jeans, they would still be these outstanding records.
Maybe we would have been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame then.
You know, what's funny is that so this piece I did with you, I think it was 2009. I talked to you about it then. I was like, and I have this mixed feeling about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I would not be surprised if you share, which is that I think that the concept is kind of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is kind of stupid. Like the bands that I love, and it has like validation is never relevant to music that I love.
Right.
On the other hand, you're just like, how are they not in there? This is stupid. You know, of course Devo should be in there.
Well, yeah, if they were true to their stated purpose and rewarding people who pushed the realm of pop music in a new direction or innovated and has a lasting influence, yeah, then we'd be in. But clearly they're a very abstract political body that operates inscrutably in their own ways, and obviously what they're rewarding doesn't have anything to do with their stated manifesto.
Well, and even that seems to be shifting because like Bon Jovi in the early years wouldn't have come within spitting distance of it, and then it was like, oh, Bon Jovi, and now it's like Pat Benatar, and I'm not trying to be down on Pat Benatar. I mean, there aren't enough women in there anyway, but I don't really, I don't think of, like, let's put on that great Pat Benatar record.
She didn't do anything about changing the course of rock music.
I mean, she did, again, she was a great artist in the MTV era. And the problem with this is that it sort of, it kind of makes us sort of like downgrade other people. I mean, I remember I looked back at my notes for when I talked to you way back when, and I was like, Mellencamp's in there and not you. Now Mellencamp is considered, like legendary guy compared to a lot of the people who were there. So, he's fine. But yeah, Devo obviously should be there. So you get to the first album, and obviously you guys have been playing together for a long time, and people know your backstory. But tell me about like just the actual recording of that record. I mean, I think that people, they have such an image of you guys as a synth record, and the first album is such a strong guitar album. It's just like this really tight guitar rocket record. Like, tell me about just how you guys wrote the songs and got together and recorded them. Obviously, produced, but like, what was the process on that like?
Oh, it's a process that we should have stuck with, actually, because we used to collaborate openly, daily, hours on end, and share our notebooks, our sketchbooks, our ideas, and they would lead to the strongest songs. And then we would, as a group, develop the songs, play together until we had something very specific we liked, and practice them. So by the time we got in the studio, we were recording pretty much live, where people were separated, by sound baffles, not total booths or rooms. You're in one live room, but you're getting direct lines as well as amplifier lines, and you're playing all the rhythm tracks at once together. So that's what you're hearing. You're hearing the immediacy of real musicians playing together that were tight,
right?
Like a machine, but there was no click track. We didn't use click tracks. Alan Myers was a human click track,
and he was a beast on the drums too. I mean, those are such strong rhythm tracks on there. I mean, it's like you could set a machine to that, but you wouldn't get that kind of feel that he added to the power of what he was doing.
Devo was better when they sounded like they were using machines, but they weren't. Then when it really was machines, the soul was gone.
Yeah. So tell me about, so it would start off with the song. Were you like writing lyrics and then coming up with the music? Were you and Mark sort of coming up with the lyrics and the music together? Like, how did that work?
In the beginning, we contributed pretty evenly on both lyrics and music. And then as it got more into machine music, it was just like he was, so enamored to programs and, the latest programmable synths, and finally like the Fairlight, and that he kind of, was so prolific at it that there wasn't going to be a song unless it was basically started with his music. Even if I added changes, even if I changed the arrangement and added chords, it didn't matter. And I was more relegated to writing all the lyrics.
And at what point did that shift happen?
Somewhere around probably, Oh No, It's Devo.
Right. So so that's 5 albums in at that point.
Yeah.
But so the first ones, my impression is that the first 2 albums, Duty Now for the Future being the second one, for those of you who don't know that, and of course should, that those first 2 albums were mostly material that you guys had worked up over the past several years. And that was, because you just had a backlog of stuff. And so something like Clock Out, which you sing is like the first song with vocals on Duty Now, I had been kicking around for a bit, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We had been laboring intensively in basements and garages, completely, unknown, completely invisible, in Akron, Ohio, in Kent, Ohio. And when we finally made it up onto the radar, we had like 40 songs over a 3-year period, and we had been practicing them. So yes, we divided up album 1 and 2 on purpose the way we did, starting with our backlog of songs.
So did you already have like what was going to be on the second album when you put the first album together? Were you like, okay, this is 1 and 2 and we already know what they are?
Yeah. And we wanted to get that out of our system because we were already, we were an experimental art collective, basically, and we already knew where we were going. So the sound you heard on Freedom of Choice is where we were already migrating to and talking about, and we wanted to get what we had been doing onto vinyl and move on.
So, and the first album was produced by Brian Eno. The second one was Ken Scott, who I knew from Supertramp because I listened to them when I was, younger, and I know that he'd worked with Bowie as well,
right.
As had Brian Eno. What was your sort of experience, like the contrast between those two producers?
Well, it was pretty much night and day, and Ken Scott was a mistake. Ken Scott was not a good fit with Devo, and he basically took very powerful, cutting edge kind of rock based Devo material, and he stripped it. I mean, he basically neutered it. He castrated the Devo power.
In what way? Like
techniques, his kind of analytical, unenthusiastic way he went about things, and the way he tried to like marginalize us and, put us in a corner and do everything himself.
So how did you end up working with him in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we were sold a bill of goods by someone at Warner's who was really afraid of us producing ourselves. And, Warner's didn't give Devo a lot of money or anything. And so out of the producers that were willing to work for 3 points and a reasonable rate for the record, he was the one being pushed the most in our faces. And it had something to do with the fact that they knew we were, Bowie acolytes. Ken had worked with David Bowie, so there was, there's the selling point.
Was there any thought of going back with Eno on that?
No, it wasn't a possibility even. Eno was moved on and he was busy, and we weren't going to go back to Europe to record. We were going to stay in LA because of all the things we had to do and because of Warner Brothers being there. And it just wasn't going to work out. David Bowie was supposed to produce it, and he kept putting it off because he was so busy with so many projects. And he was doing that movie Gigolo, and that put another 2 months on it. And we said, listen, we can't wait any longer. We feel like we need to get this out now. It was like the Talking Heads had released, Blondie had released, B-52s were coming out. It just felt like we were going to look like guys chasing the zeitgeist when we had started it. So he goes, okay, I understand. Here, I'll fly to New York. You meet with Brian. Brian's keen on doing this. And, they had both just done that 3-album cycle that ended with the great record. Yeah. And we thought, that's great. And we met Brian, and Mark and I loved him, and he was fun to be with and really smart. So it just felt good. And it was the right thing to do because they hook us up with Connie Plank, who's famous for his krautrock. And it was the perfect marriage of people that are into experimenting in the studio and using cutting edge engineering techniques and new sounds. And, the enthusiasm and the technical skill was a good match.
Did he bring out things in the songs that surprised you?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes he did, especially on things like where you wouldn't expect it, like Mongoloid. The sound of that song had everything to do with Eno, and Shrivel Up absolutely created that sequencer line that we played to. That was the only song on the record where we played to a click.
On Satisfaction, was he the one who came up with the loop of baby, 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 baby,
No.
baby, baby?
No, we had worked that out, and Mark had been doing that live. And so what we did is we said, let's exaggerate it. Let's make it too much on purpose.
You and I spoke right before you guys played all of Q, Are We Not Men, and Freedom of Choice at the Vic in Chicago.
Yeah.
And you were working on the new album at the time. And I got the Jihad Jerry album at Record Store Day, which I really enjoy. And it's kind of a Devo record, but all you songs. And it's the impression that I'm getting from a lot of the stuff that I've read is that you're kind of the guy who really wants to sort of keep Devo going and active. And sometimes it's, you have to sort of tug a little harder to make that happen.
Yeah. I mean, I single-handedly keep the spirit of Devo alive. That's right.
How is that? How do you do that?
Yeah, at great stress to my own body and mind.
Well, why does it take such an effort?
I don't know. I really don't. I'm the same guy that started the band. I'm the same guy I was then. I see the world the same way. I have the same values. I have the same enthusiasm for creating a certain aesthetic that started Devo, and it never changed. So I can't speak for Mark. I don't know what happened there. But
you feel like he's not as singularly devoted to that.
Not at all. Oh no, he not at all. He just cares about composing. That's it.
You got the five of you in the studio doing this. So your brother is there, Bob. There's Bob Mothersbaugh. There's Alan. How did each of them kind of contribute to the arrangements of these songs? Like, what was the role that each person played?
Well, arrangements, that was really in my domain and sometimes Mark's domain. I had most of the arrangement ideas, but the parts that had been worked out by us playing together were obviously the result of the personalities involved. Like, no one told Bob Mothersbaugh what to play. No one told Bob Casale what to play. I have a lot of ideas or a lot of suggestions, but what would happen is out of the things they would do, of course, you respond to the one that works, that gets you off, and you go, do that again, do that even more. Oh, let's make that, more trebly and do it even more. So it evolved. It was organic. And the players were so important. Alan Myers, I would just tell him an idea, beat it with my hands, and he'd turn it into a finished, pristine track like that. I mean, the guy was amazing.
How did you guys decide who was going to sing which song?
That kind of came about because a lot of the parts that we were playing made it impossible for me to sing live and play the part at the same time. It was too polyrhythmic. And so Mark started singing more live than we did on the recordings. And people didn't know who was singing back then, if it was him or me. And so live, he was singing more because all he was playing was synthesizer leads on that early material. He didn't have to constantly play anything. So we worked on his stage presence, and he became the front man.
Did you want to be singing more originally? Did you envision that?
I just was. And all I ever cared about was the big idea. I cared about not, me, but Devo, the concept. So whatever would best serve the big idea, I was always fine with.
Right. And you had two sets of brothers in this band. Did that ever complicate things? Was that a good thing or sibling rivalry thing? It wasn't like the Kinks times two or something.
Yeah, no, in the beginning it was a very good thing. Well, then once things devolve, right? Then you get these tribal camps, then it became tribal camps. And I have no explanation for that. I don't live my life that way, and I find it disconcerting and, almost abhorrent. I say, what's the best idea here, and what will make the coolest result. And so once it devolves into tribalism, I'm out. I can't work in that world, and I don't thrive in that world.
So was it like the Mothersbaugh tribe and the Casale tribe, or was it?
Yeah. That's what was forced. I mean, it wasn't my reality. It was a reality that got forced down my throat.
Were the conflicts about sort of the musical direction, or just the band career steps you would take, or what was it about?
That's a good question. I wish I knew the answer. It certainly didn't seem to be about, creative differences. That's not the case.
At what point in the conception of these albums were you sort of thinking about also the presentation and the look and, the outfit and how you were going to perform them on stage?
From the beginning. Oftentimes we'd have a video idea before an actual song. And then the song would be driven by the idea that had been the visual idea.
So when you're doing like Uncontrollable Urge, you already know you're going to be wearing the yellow suits and this and that. And then you knew sort of what the costume change was going to be for the second album.
Yeah.
Would you take any of that into the studio? Like when you're recording Freedom of Choice, are you guys wearing the energy domes as you're playing these songs?
No.
So you're still going into the studio like as sort of like regular musicians, but there's already the sense of this is how we're going to present it. And this is what the concept of this period/record is.
Pretty much. I mean, it was very, everything was discussed and consciously, conceptually worked out. Yeah.
So tell me, what was the thought process? Like let's take those first three records. I mean, you could do this for the first, 5 or really do it for all of them. But like each one, you're like, okay, we're going to present ourselves this way and then this way and then this way. What was the thinking behind it, and how, like, did you guys all hammer that out together? Did you sort of say, no, this is what I want?
No, I mean, Mark and I had a really compatible aesthetic. I mean, our aesthetics overlapped 90%. So, in the beginning, whoever had a great idea, the other person recognized and you were inspired. It wasn't like, well, wait a minute, that's his idea, so fuck that. It wasn't like that.
Right.
So it became the Devo idea. And it was done in the service of a bigger thing than individuals, so that the whole, was bigger than the sum of the parts. And we were building on previous aesthetics at a certain point. You kind of, you're you at that point, you've done you, and now you can't not do you. You're doing some new variation, some different aspect of you. And that's what you were seeing. I mean, suddenly wearing, full head rubber hair based on Reagan and Kennedy's presidential hairdos, that flows from past Devo stuff. Even though it's different, it's still in the same wheelhouse, same aesthetic lane.
Right. So that was New Traditionalists, which I think of as also very, like, that's a blue record, and Freedom of Choice is the red record with the red energy domes. And then, you have sort of the yellow record, which is the first one. And I guess New Duty Now is kind of white. So each one of those, you're like, okay, we're going to shift, and this is going to be the way we're going to look on that one. Those.
Yeah. And the music had something to do with it as well. And then my developing repertoire and knowledge of staging, from working with lighting designers, and I started getting even more ideas, and I was directing all the videos, and so that was an area I thrived in. I was always thinking about costume design and staging of the show and lighting effects and theatrical tricks. That excited me, and I was driving most of that. Right.
So I remember being, I don't know if junior high or maybe freshman year of high school. I'll have to get the dates right, but Saturday Night Live starts off I think it was like the third season, and the Rolling Stones were the guests the first week.
Right.
And I knew the Rolling Stones, and then the next week was this band I'd never heard of called Devo, and you guys came out and you did Satisfaction and Jocko Homo. I was like, wow, like that made an impression on me, and I'm sure a lot of people.
Yeah.
How big a deal of that was that for you guys?
That was probably one of the most important linchpin foundations of our whole career. I mean, everything changed overnight. Saturday Night Live was a big deal. There were 3 networks back then. There was no cable. When on Saturday night, they had about 15 million people watching. Everybody saw Devo, and it blew their minds. It scared them, either pissed them off or made them so excited. It was very polarizing. And suddenly overnight, we were going from playing clubs to like 3,000 seaters because of that appearance.
So how did you get it? And then how did you feel before the performance? Were you totally nervous, or were you just like, this is where we should be?
Probably never been more nervous in my life when people say I shit my pants. It's almost literal. That's what you feel. It's involuntary response. You know, your gut is going through peristalsis times 10, and it's just very scary. It's totally live, and the audience is right on top of you, and they're all staring at you. You know, and the unseen announcer, the God voice, you know, and now Devo, and you're on, boom, and in the dark, you know, when you're down between commercial break, it's totally dark, and Lorne Michaels comes over with his assistant, and they put a flashlight under him, so he looks like, you know, a ghoul, right? You know, like a horror movie. And he goes, all right, guys, you know, when you hear whoever the announcer's voice is, when you hear that over the PA system and he says, Devo, I don't care what's wrong up here or what instrument isn't working, you play your asses off because 15 million people are going to see you, and don't blow it. And then the light goes off and he walks away. And
yeah, that's a way to relax you before your performance.
Well, the adrenaline was so rushing. We played so tight and fast. People thought it was a special effect. They didn't think it was real.
Yeah, my memory was you doing Satisfaction first, and then you did Jocko Homo as the second one. Right. Were you a little more, was it different doing the second song? By then you're like, okay, we've done this.
Yeah, because you've gone to the bathroom.
How did you get that booking? Like, were you surprised when you found out you're going to be on there in the week after?
Well, I'd been trying to get on there for 2 years, sending packages to Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, which I was assured when we finally got our manager, Elliot Roberts, I was assured that those probably went right in the wastebasket every time. And so when we met Elliot because of Neil Young, because he managed Neil.
Right.
And all these managers were besieging us. And Neil said, you should talk to Elliot. And Elliot goes, what do you want? And I said, well, all these managers, they want 20% and they want a piece of our publishing. And I think that's wrong. And he goes, I don't want your publishing, and I'll do it for 15%. And we'll do handshake. I can get rid of you in 30 days. You can get rid of me in 30 days notice. He goes, anything else? I said, absolutely. I want on Saturday Night Live. He goes, all right, you come into my office Monday morning, you and Mark come in, and you'll be on Saturday Night Live. I go, what? You know, I thought it was a joke. And he goes, I know Lauren so well. You'll be on Saturday Night Live. So sure enough, he calls Lauren. And what I don't realize is that the call that we get to hear is performance. It's a setup. He's already called Lauren. He's already promised Lauren if he takes Devo, he'll give him Neil Young, because Lauren's been after Neil Young for 3 years since the first show. And Neil's always said no. So he gets a commitment out of Neil to play Saturday Night Live, promises Lauren that if he'll take this new band Devo that Lauren doesn't give a fuck about and thinks is really wacko. And that's how he did it. He brokered a deal.
How amazing is it to have a manager who's willing to leverage Neil Young to help you guys out?
fantastic because he was, Neil and him went way back, and Neil trusted him.
Well, that's pretty good. I'd read years ago there was a story about you and Mark having to play the recording of Satisfaction for Mick Jagger in some New York office.
Yeah, we did that. Yeah. We were in Peter Rudge's office, who was the, Darth Vader manager of the Rolling Stones. And he's in a 3-piece Savile Row suit with a paisley tie and one of those shirts with white collars and cuffs. And Mick Jagger came in, and he clearly had just gotten out of bed, and he was in stocking feet and looking kind of tired. And Peter Rudge poured him a glass of claret, and he had his glass of red wine, introduced himself with politeness, and then he said, "Let's hear it then." And we put it in the boom box on the mantle of the fireplace that was going in Peter Rudge's office. It was that kind of a sumptuous office.
Yeah, I was going to say, of course, the fireplace in his office. Go ahead.
And Jagger had his head down and swirling a glass of wine. For 30 seconds, he didn't do anything. Then he set the glass of wine down, stood up, started dancing around in his stocking feet, sliding on the wooden floor, acting like Mick Jagger, saying, "I like it, I like it."
That must have been like one of the highlights up to that point, if not forever.
It was incredible.
Getting the personal Mick Jagger dance right in front of you to your song, your interpretation.
Yeah. And then we flew back to LA, and Elliot threw cold water on the whole thing, saying, "Listen, I told Peter Rudge to tell Mick to really act like he likes it, because he's going to get all the publishing money, and he's going to make a ton off of you guys."
Well, the fact that he thought he was going to make a ton off of you guys is a good sign anyway, though, because that means people are going to hear it and buy it and all of that.
Yeah.
So Freedom of Choice is like that pivotal third album, and it sounds like it's the one where you were sort of developing most of the material after you'd already become known as Devo, as opposed to developing your stuff in your little, small rooms you were playing.
Yeah. That was all written between 1979 and 1980 in LA.
Yeah. And it's a really it's like a great poppy rock record. Like, it's just like in terms of just melodies and everything else. So what was the process like for that one?
Well, it was still the all for one for all, Three Musketeers Devo, Five Musketeers Devo. That was a result of still open collaboration.
Was there a thought to sort of make it more melodic, or is that just sort of what was coming out at that time? Because it's a very hooky record.
Yeah, I know. And no, it was just what we were doing. It's like what we wanted to do.
And again, was it mostly you and Mark sort of writing the songs together?
Yeah.
When you wrote them, did you think, "Oh, Whip It is the hit," or did you think, "No, Girlie Wants the hit," or whatever?
No, we certainly, we weren't capable of thinking in a cynical commercial way, believe it or not. We didn't put a song on a record if we didn't like it. And so we liked Whip It because we put it on there, but we didn't like it more than Freedom of Choice, or more than, Girl You Want, or
Gates of Steel.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys played, you played on Fridays then, so you sort of migrated from one live show to the other one. And they're these great, you could watch them on YouTube, and I recommend anyone who's listening to this, they should check them out. But you guys play Girl You Want and Gates of Steel. And then I think you go, and I think that might be from the same week, you also do Uncontrollable Urge. But those are like these powerhouse performances of those two songs, Gates of Steel and Girl You Want.
Those were great times on Fridays. We were on that show 3 times, and each time we got to play 3 songs. And it was a great experience.
So what was the reason to do Fridays instead of SNL again?
Lauren wasn't interested in having us back. Well, we weren't embraced by that New York elite hip-wazzy crowd. We just weren't. I mean, they loved David Byrne. They loved Hall & Oates. I'll tell you, it was John Wenner probably that cast a curse on Devo, because he hated us from the time we did the cover of Satisfaction. He thought we were making fun of the Rolling Stones, and they were his gods. He named his paper after them. So he just turned his back on Devo and started using his reporters to shit on us.
Yeah, that's such an odd reaction to that, because in all the times I've heard that song, I never thought you were like taking the piss out of the Rolling Stones. I just thought you came up with this really cool. And I mean, and you again, you're embraced by Bowie. Like I thought the New York people liked that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would have thought so. But we weren't. We were like the Rodney Dangerfields of new wave. No respect.
Produced Are We Not Men, and then I think right afterwards did more songs about buildings and food, the Talking Heads record.
That's right.
And as someone who really likes both albums, it sort of made sense to me that that's sort of the order and the proximity in which those were done, because they both are these very tightly wound records, kind of lean and tight and rhythmic.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're huge on MTV and you have this big hit that you didn't anticipate with Whip It. What did that do to the band and your creative process?
Well, I was happy about it because I thought now, we're at a new level of opportunity. We could get more people to listen to us about our ideas, and maybe now finally get to do the Devo movie, and maybe now we can finally do this, this video game thing that was starting to happen. And in other words, I was all excited about what opportunities suddenly having commercial success would afford us. And what I didn't see coming was, again, the hierarchy and the politics, or fame going to somebody's head and changing them.
So who changed in what way?
Well, I ain't talking.
Well, I mean, there obviously you and Mark are the key creative forces behind that band. So you went in to do New Traditionalists with your plastic hair and Kennedy Reagan stuff. Yeah. Were you as happy with that album as with the previous, at least with Freedom of Choice?
No, a lot of bad things happened in the recording of that record, and I don't mean even between the band members. I mean with schedules, with believe it or not, 3M tape, 2-inch, master tape that started disintegrating. After we had most of our tracks recorded and we were doing overdubs and we had depleted our budget, and now the songs as they existed on mixed were falling apart. And we had to transfer to the new digital format to try to save them, to try to stop the deterioration. And then we had to take that back to the record plant in Los Angeles and start recording with this new format that we had dumped them onto, that was really unreliable and created new problems. Hideous.
I mean, if you don't mind my saying this, I always felt like that album just kind of didn't have the sort of sonic pop of the previous ones.
That's why.
It's a little bit sort of mushier feeling. And there's some fantastic songs on it, but I always felt like it was a little more kind of buzzy, but not less punchy.
You hear the technical problem.
And I remember getting that record, and there was a 7-inch of Working on a Coal Mine in it, which was released as a single. Was that something that you had planned to put on there all along, or was that
we did that song for the movie Heavy Metal.
Right. I remember that.
And Warner Brothers, we did that because Warner Brothers heard the demo tapes and weren't interested at all in that song being on our record. So we said, well, can we use it for Heavy Metal? They said, sure. Then it became a kind of hit. And Warner's is like, that has to be on your record, but it was too late. So they stuck a 7-inch in there after the fact because they changed 180 degrees their assessment of the song.
Did that affect at all how they promoted the original songs that were on the album as well? Or was that just sort of a little bonus that you also got that 7-inch because that had already been a hit at that point?
They were just grasping at straws because I had gone to them with Elliot Roberts and said, listen, we need to re-record these songs for New Traditionalists because here's what happened in New York. Here's what happened at the record plant. They don't sound as good as these songs are. We got to re-record it. But of course, it was like, well, we're not paying for that. And of course, we didn't have the money to start over with the recording budget.
Right.
So they wouldn't pay up to let us re-record them. And that's why you hear what you hear. We had to make do with those, technically challenged recordings that were because of the tape. And we sued 3M and we got nothing. They go, we'll give you new tape.
Oh yeah, that's helpful. Well, there's still some excellent songs on that record, but it seems like the one that sort of stands out now that people sort of look back on as like the sort of classic song from that record is "Beautiful World,"
right?
Which you sing and you made the video, right. I think, and the song and the video are very like the sort of tonal shift of the lyrics and the tonal shift of the visuals are very tied together. Like, tell me about sort of the evolution of that song and video and everything else.
Well, once I wrote the lyrics and saved the punchline, right? You think, wait, Devo's gone soft. What is this? Beautiful world. It's soporific music, and he's singing about that it's a beautiful world. How can they do that? And then it's like, yeah, for you, but not for me. As soon as I wrote those lyrics, what I had in mind was a archival montage that would start with silly 50s and 60s kitsch and cycle pop culture from America into the darkness of America with the bigotry, the racial tension, and then of course going straight for the atomic bomb,
right?
And because the dark side of human nature wins. And oddly enough, my thought process was it'll be like Bonnie and Clyde, where it starts off kind of fun bank robbing and then ends up horribly tragic, right? The tone of that movie went from banjo happy to, murder.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was the idea that's what we do for the video. And I couldn't wait to do it. So it was a very strong, single-minded concept where the song and the video were one thing.
Did you write the lyrics before the music, or were they sort of together?
They were together. Mark started playing that music, and I actually thought it was funny. I thought he was just fucking around trying to be like a lounge musician. And I started singing like a lounge musician, like crooning. And then we just played off of each other. And when I go, for you, but not for me, then we started laughing.
Wow.
So, it was Dan's opinion.
Well, it's funny because I went back and rewatched the video of that, which I'd remembered at the time. And also when I would see you in concert, like the first time I saw you was on the New Traditionalist tour, actually. It was at the Aragon Ballroom. It was the first indoor concert I ever went to. And
I remember that.
Showed a bunch of the videos beforehand.
That's right.
And then did the concert. But anyway, I rewatched the Beautiful World video, and it still hits hard, and partly because of like what's going on now. And it's like, I keep wishing that your sort of theory of devolution would be proven wrong.
Me too.
Just for the sake of humankind.
Me
but,
too.
just seeing all of the, just like devolve into violence and racism and war and this and that. I'm like, well, that was from, 81. So we're like
81.
41 years on, and it hits.
And we're worse off than we were. We're worse off than we were. It's American fascism. I'm not being hyperbolic. It's American fascism. You're going to watch this country turn fascist. And these rogue Republicans with Trump are going to do it. And the Supreme Court is behind it all. And those guys are like the Handmaid's Tale. They're like the American Taliban. And what they're doing to the American public with these rulings, and the latest one, stripping Roe v. Wade, is diabolical. It's like the worst horror movie you can imagine. And you will not believe the consequences coming our way. They have created tenfold the pain and suffering that we all experience because we're mortals. As human beings, they have ratcheted it up exponentially, and it's about to hit home.
Can art respond to this, or is it just sort of too far beyond?
Too far beyond.
Because I mean, you lived through Kent State and you knew people who were killed in Kent State, and that was sort of, I
thought they'd be the worst thing in my life, and I'm wrong.
Right. Yeah, and obviously you've been doing this for a while, but like, what can artists do right now?
There's not much they can do. There's not much they can do, because where do you channel that rage, even creatively? Does it matter? You're still part of the entertainment industry. Meanwhile, real people die by the thousands and hundreds of thousands, and lives are ruined, and the environment's ruined, and the food supply's ruined, and women's rights are ruined, and there'll be the gnashing of teeth. And so, okay, they played your song on the radio, and maybe you're rich. What are you going to do?
That's it for episode 35 of Caropop. Thanks so much to Gerald Casale of Devo for opening up about his experiences with this awesome band. I suggest you give those first 5 Devo albums a spin, and then maybe skip ahead to 2010 Something for Everybody. Then please return here next week for part 2 of our conversation. Gerald Casale covers a lot of ground and is not shy about saying what's what. Thanks as always to web designer Marty Rosenbaum and to Lou Carlozo, who recorded the Caropop theme, which I must admit had some Devo influence when I made it up. Caropop is produced by Chris Swade, who's the producer you want. I've got a gut feeling about that. I'm Mark Caro. Please follow me on Twitter at Mark Caro, at MarkCaro, and visit the Caropop website, caropop.com, for posts about music, movies, and food, and also this Caropop podcast. Please share, subscribe, and tune in again next week for part 2 of Caropop with Gerald Casale. Thanks.